Welcome to the conversation and the third installment of our series, The Stakes in the States. Tonight, we'll be talking about Pennsylvania, including an inside look at what's happening in the legislature this session, thanks to our special guest for the evening, Pennsylvania Representative Austin Davis. But first, I want to say hello to everyone who's joining us and to everyone who will listen to this later on. My co hosts tonight are Cameron and Brittany from Fearless Action, which is a group organized and led by college students who are committed to electing lawmakers who will serve the working class. And my name is Sarah. I work for the States Project. And if you're new to what we do, we work to build governing power for state lawmakers committed to improving lives. And I know that's a lot of information in one sentence, so let me break that down a bit. We analyze all 99 state legislative chambers in the country and find which are possible to flip to win a majority that will work to improve lives. So that means identifying which districts will be key and which candidates will be the majority makers. And we do it because we know state lawmakers decide every issue we care about. And I truly mean every issue. Can everyone access quality, affordable health care? How far do you have to drive to cast a ballot? And is the air that you're breathing and the water that you're drinking clean? These are all questions that state lawmakers decide, not politicians in DC. And that brings me to Pennsylvania, which is one of the states where we are actively fighting to shift the balance of power this November. And when we talk about the stakes in the states, there is a lot at stake in Pennsylvania. So we're going to go ahead and dive in with Representative Davis. Representative, I'd love to spend our first few minutes just on your personal story. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and what first drew you to public service?
I'm Austin Davis. I'm a Pennsylvania state representative for the 35th legislative district in the western part of Pennsylvania, right outside of the city of Pittsburgh. But I got elected I won a special election in January of 2018 and have been in the legislature. This is my fifth year. But I ran for office because I grew up in a poor, low income, former steel mill industrial town called McKeesport. And when I grew up here, the steel mills had collapsed in the early 80s, and McKeesport, which once had a thriving population of about 60,000 people, had collapsed to about 19,000 people. And we had seen all the things that come along with a depressed community, from economic blight to poverty to high rates of gun violence, and really decided to get involved when I was 16 years old because of gun violence that was going on in my neighborhood, and wanted to make a difference. And so I founded the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council when I was 16. But that led to a career in public service, stint serving as a senior advisor to the Allegheny County Executive, Rich Fitzgerald, serving as a legislative intern prior to that, and then ultimately running for the state house. And when I got elected, I was the youngest state legislator in Pennsylvania at the time.
Hi, Representative. This is Brittany with Fearless Action speaking. Thank you so much for sharing your story. That's really inspiring, especially to young people like me. So you first began serving your state at the legislature at the age of 21 as an intern in the same chamber where you're now an elected member. And as a college student myself, I'd really just love to hear your perspective on this. So why should young people pay attention to the states?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and thank you for being so involved. The states are really where governing happens. I think people oftentimes get caught up in what's going on at the federal level with the president and Congress, because they get so much more attention. But in state legislatures, we truly do make laws that affect you every single day. From voting rights access, because we administer elections at the state level, to ensuring a woman has the right to choose, because we regulate health and reproductive rights here as a state. I would say most of the action that's going on in this country are happening at the state level. Most of the most pressing battles that ultimately happen on the federal level usually start out in the states. When I interned in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, it really opened my eyes to the power of state government, and how government can really be a force for good. And so I would encourage young people to really get involved. If you went back and asked me, at the time, if I ever thought I would serve in that body as a member, I probably would have told you no. But being involved in my community and showing an interest, you never know where this journey is going to take you. But I would tell you the fight for our future here as a country, the fight for democracy, is really going to happen at the state level. And I think as we continue to see Washington have an inability to deal with the problems that everyday Americans are facing, more and more of these battles are going to be fought and either won or lost at the state level.
That's such an important message. I think it's just so crucial for folks to hear over and over and over again that the things that you care about, the issues that you see in the headlines, are truly being decided at the state level. And so we at the States Project, we're fighting to shift power in several states, but specifically Pennsylvania. Right now, we're 4 seats away from a new majority in the Senate there and 12 seats away in the House of Representatives. And thanks to fair congressional maps, which were enacted this year, we believe this could be doable. So, that said, what could your caucus's policy priorities look like if a new majority is elected this November?
Well, I think immediately would be to shore up our democracy and make sure everyone has equal access to the ballot box. To make sure we're making voting in Pennsylvania as easy as possible. We passed mail-in voting a couple of years ago, but there have been some problems around it and policies that we could pass to make it easier, like pre-canvassing of ballots. I think that would be one of our top priorities. I think raising the minimum wage in Pennsylvania to a living wage would absolutely be a top priority of our caucus. Pennsylvania is stuck with a minimum wage at $7.25, and we know it's far past time that we raise the minimum wage. That would absolutely, I think, be on the agenda in Harrisburg if Democrats were to take a majority. And thirdly, to make sure we're protecting a woman's right to choose and make her own healthcare decisions without fear of government intrusion. I think those three things would most undoubtedly be some of our top priorities as House Democrats.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Cameron with Fearless Action. I'm also a college student representative. I just wanted to say thank you so much for fighting for these issues. As young people ourselves, we can, really resonate with what you're fighting for. As far as these policy initiatives go, to make these hopes a reality, we're going to have to pick up these seats in Pennsylvania, just as Sarah said, which means investing in races and candidates. And we know that it's often cheaper to flip an entire state chamber than it is to win a single congressional seat, which is incredible. And we've covered why state races are so critical. But, I'm wondering, can you talk to us about what it's like to build up a state legislative campaign from the ground up? What do the dollars raised for these races actually translate to when you're working on the ground?
Yeah, I would say your dollar, if you're a donor and you care about Democrats, an investment that you make in a state legislative campaign or a state house campaign committee is going to go a lot further than any other race that you're going to invest in. Many times, state legislative races are very local races. In Pennsylvania, each legislative district only has about 62,000 people. So you are able to every dollar that's invested is usually going right back into that campaign in the forms of communication, in the forms of field organizing and staff. So I would say you get the biggest bang for your buck if you're going to invest in those communities and most in those type of races. And most legislative races are run without large staffs, without kind of the glitz and the glamour that you see at higher levels of politics. It's really in the weeds, doing the work, reaching out and talking to people on their doorstep. You can do more, and it has potentially a greater impact. And the result of a majority in the state legislature can be life-changing for millions of people in your state.
And speaking of that, I want to touch on two issues that are in the headlines right now. And the first is democracy. So we've seen a tidal wave of anti-voter laws proposed by right-wing lawmakers across the country. And so I'm just curious, what has the fight for voting rights looked like on the ground in Pennsylvania this session?
The Republican majority a couple of years ago, before 2020, passed Act 77, which was a mail-in voting law here in Pennsylvania. What they did not anticipate is how many people would take advantage of it and how that would benefit Democrats. And so this session, our fight has been to try to stop them from repealing it and making it more difficult for folks to access the ballot box. they have pushed a series of bills and lawsuits to try to restrict access. And let's be real, they're not trying to restrict access for wealthy Republican voters. They're trying to limit access for poor Black and Brown voters. They don't want them to have the same voice in our democracy as the people that support them. And so we've been pushing back very hard and very vigorously to say that everybody should have equal access to the ballot. And voting should be as easy as possible here in Pennsylvania. And that includes implementing drop boxes. That includes same day voting, same day registration for voting. That means making sure that we're giving counties the resources that they need to carry out our elections in a fair and efficient manner. And quite frankly, the Republican majority has been starving many of those counties from the resources that they need to carry out our elections effectively.
Thank you for that perspective. I think the second issue that's in the news right now that folks are paying attention to is abortion access. The Supreme Court is poised to potentially overturn Roe v. Wade this year, which leaves state lawmakers to decide abortion in their states. So, what would the loss of Roe look like in Pennsylvania?
Well, I tell you, the loss of Roe would be devastating in Pennsylvania. If the Supreme Court strikes down Roe versus Wade and we have a Republican majority in Harrisburg, there is no doubt in my mind that they will move very quickly to outlaw an abortion and will, quite frankly, lead to putting more women at risk and in danger. I believe we're at a real inflection point in this country when it comes to reproductive health care access for women, and we can't afford to go back. And I am fairly confident if Roe is stricken down, Pennsylvania potentially could become one of the most conservative states in the country as it relates to abortion access.
Thank you so much for touching on those issues. Those are really important right now. And these are the kinds of issues that really drive me as a young person to go out and mobilize the youth vote. So today we've covered some really heavy topics. So I'd actually like to end on just a little bit of a lighter note. Representative, can you share something that has brought you hope or joy recently?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been traveling the state. I'm engaged in a statewide campaign at the moment, and I have been traveling all corners of the state, and I am really hopeful at the people's resilience here in Pennsylvania and their fighting spirit. People are really engaged and wanting to make a difference in their community, wanting to fight for the issues that are important to them. And that gives me joy every time I go to a community and see how many folks are dedicated to the same cause that we're all fighting for. And I can tell you, Pennsylvania is often a swing state, but I feel like Democrats are fired up in this election, and that we are not taking this year lightly or for granted. And that gives me a lot of hope and joy.
I love that. Such an important message. When you do this work day in and day out, it can feel easy to fall into a bit of despair sometimes when it feels like maybe folks aren't, digging in as much as we want them to, or whatever the case may be. But I love that, and it's so true. When you get out and talk to folks, you see exactly how much they care and how much they want to get involved and improve lives. So thank you for spending this time with us, Representative Davis. And before we close, I'd like to make sure that everyone who hears this understands exactly how they can get involved in the fight to flip Pennsylvania this November. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to my coworker, Melissa Walker.
Thanks so much, Sarah. This was such a great conversation, and I really appreciate everyone who's here. So you may be thinking about state legislatures in a new light just from the last 20 minutes, because I think even just hearing what we just heard indicates so much about how these are power centers where the radical right has been organizing for decades, and where choice is decided and where voting laws happen. And really, these state capitals are the true foundations of democracy that are too often ignored when Washington, D.C. takes the headlines. And here's the thing. You can have an impact here, a real impact. We said it earlier. It is often cheaper to change the balance of power in a state chamber than it is to win a single competitive congressional seat. And in Pennsylvania, we're talking about 12 state house seats and 4 state Senate seats on better maps than we've had in a very long time. So there is a real path to action here, a path to focus on the seats that we need to win to take a new majority in Harrisburg and to make change that can reverberate across the nation. So when you join the States Project by forming a giving circle with your friends, your family, your networks, know that this way to plug in lights a real path that can create change in our country. We do not have to be witnesses to the death of democracy. You, with your community and this information and support and tools from our team at the States Project, can fight for this country at a foundational level, and you can choose Pennsylvania as your target state if you are interested in what you've heard tonight. So if you go to statesproject.org/action, you can find out more and learn from our team. Thanks for joining us. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, Melissa. And I want to repeat that URL just one more time. If you're ready to get involved, it's statesproject.org/action. And it's just going to ask you for your name and email. And then our team is going to reach out with the tools that you need to get involved. So super simple, takes 2 seconds, statesproject.org/action. And I hope this conversation has left you feeling empowered and ready to get involved, because you truly can have a huge impact in the States. And we need you in this fight. So thanks again for joining us. And we hope to see you here back soon.